Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Dan Goldstein. Dan is an academic who has been a professor at London Business School and a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute, Columbia University, Yahoo Research, and Microsoft Research. Before that, he spent a decade performing, writing, directing, and producing comedy shows around the world. And a couple times he nearly left academia for show business. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Pete. Great to be here.
This is fun. So Dan's an old friend. I'm eager to talk to him. Dan, if you weren't working as a research scientist and weren't able to perform, write, direct, and produce comedy shows, what would you be doing?
I'd probably be a writer. I'd probably be a looking for work TV writer, because a lot of people that I used to perform with and direct and so on found work in show business, writing for TV.
Writing for TV. But if you would be, I'm not letting you write comedy shows. So what type of shows are you writing then in TV?
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
So if I were not...
You can't do comedy, you can't be a research scientist.
What would I like to do?
What would you be doing?
I don't know. If I were 12, I'd be like a video game tester. It's like, that seems like everybody wants
It's the new fireman. It's the new firefighter.
Yeah. And then when you're a little bit older, it's I want to be like a graphic designer. So if you stay home during the day and watch TV, they have these commercials like, be a graphic designer. Get on the computer.
XYZ Institute.
And video. Yeah, at the Institute. Here's the number. Because I think there's some jobs where everyone imagines like, that's for me, or at least a huge swath of the population imagines like, that's for me. That would be so much fun. I'm creative. I know what's good and what's bad. And I know how to use a computer. So I would like to do that.
I think being a designer is a good job if you're good at it.
Yeah. Right. But it probably has we should do like the dark side of design.
Oh, sure.
Right. It probably has all these things that you don't imagine, like hours of tedious work, like coloring things in and so on, and huge deadlines and little sleep and so on,
and dealing with clients. Mm-hmm. So there's this guy, I think his name is Mike Montero, something like that. He's a Bay Area based. It's like Mule Design. He's kind of a big mouth guy. I actually sent him an email once just saying, I've seen some of your videos and I like what you're saying. And if I'm ever in San Francisco, I'd like to interview you for the podcast. So he has a sort of semi-famous design video called Fuck You, Pay Me.
Uh-huh.
and it's about how designers are often too nice. They don't do a good job getting contract work, getting good contracts and being friends with their clients. And so he goes into depth about some of those challenges. He talks about the solutions, but obviously the whole way it's about all the challenges that you're facing, trying to be a business person and then also a creative mind.
I saw a cartoon, I think on Reddit, yesterday that said, like a teacher telling the students, like, what do you pay doctors with? And the students are like, money. And the teacher's like, what do you pay lawyers with? And the students are like, money. And the teacher goes, what do you pay artists with? And the students go, exposure.
Right. That's it. And I think that's a lot of his message in this way about don't work for free and all these things.
Right in his title. I would probably be, I'd probably be a computer programmer.
Yes.
If I were not a research scientist or in somehow doing show business, I'd probably be a computer programmer because it is really Pavlovian. Like you just have these little problems and then you solve them and then you feel like rewarded and it's kind of like, it's a little suspenseful because at the end of the day, you can leave things like where you don't know how it's going to turn out the next day and then pick it up and you can basically forget about it when you're not working on it. And I don't know. I think that would be a good job for me.
I think it would too, in part because I think being a programmer is a lot like being an artist in ways.
You certainly get better through practice, and you become a master, at the end of you're
solving problems. Mm-hmm. It can be pleasurable in a flow state kind of way.
Mm-hmm. No one's over your shoulder, like telling you like, move this up, move that. Like you were kind of, within the constraints of what the program has to do, you have a lot of latitude in how you design the program and, what you call things and how you shape it. So you really are building something.
Yes. There might be a difference then between the design and programming. I was going to work towards this idea. One of the things he talks about is you often get paid as a designer for an hour worth of work, although it took you 21 hours to do the project.
Yep.
So the client wants to pay you for the hour, but you needed 20 hours of stumbling around, screwing up, going down this wrong path to hit that magical hour, which you don't know when it's going to come and how it's going to arrive in that way. That probably doesn't work for computer programming though. You build a lot more instead of having this moment of insight as a programmer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Although I think like the final rate you can demand does reflect the amount of experience you have behind you, which means that it's not taking you 10 hours, it's taking you 2 hours because you've done so much in the past and you kind of know what to do.
So you
stumble less. Yeah. I don't know if that's true in design, but you definitely stumble less in programming the better you are. So if somebody's incredibly good, you can imagine them wanting $5,000 an hour if they can solve the problem for the same amount of money that somebody else could, but it would take a lot more time.
Mm-hmm. Now
there's some joke about that too.
You mean a joke to be made, or is there like a real joke?
No, there's a real joke where like it's not going to be funny, but this is about the idea.
I'll be the judge.
It's about the idea, man. No, it's more like a business school like anecdote, right? Or they're like, there's some trouble at the nuclear power plant, and it's a crisis, and they have to call this one guy in the middle of the night, to come down and solve the problem, and they have no other choice to pull this guy out of retirement, and he comes in and he looks around at the room and he picks up a screwdriver and like turns one screw a quarter turn and says, "All right, that'll be $50,000."
Yes, right.
$50,000. All you did was turn a screw. And he's like, "Yeah, but I knew which one."
That's right. It's true. It's about creating value. So you do some programming nowadays. As part of your job.
Yeah. I work at Microsoft. I'm surrounded by very good programmers, and it inspires me to become a better programmer myself. Mm-hmm. And I delight in that part of doing scientific research, like writing the program to analyze the research and to make graphs and things like that, to really get at the answers to the questions, not just running the standard analysis, but getting more insight into the data by writing my own code. Yeah.
Writing your own code.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a note here that says you measure things a lot.
I do.
You measure things a lot. And then you also are very focused on the resulting data. So this is in your professional life, but is also in your personal life.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I had a whole coffee measuring thing where I was measuring like the number of grams of coffee beans and water in different ratios. And then I got a coffee maker where you can set the temperature to 1 Fahrenheit degree. So I was like trying different temperatures of like brewing the coffee. Then I realized like, it's not just that, it's the temperature at which you drink the coffee.
Yes. Okay.
And that's actually what I found like made the biggest difference.
The temperature at the consumption temperature.
Yeah. The temperature at which you drink it is like really key. Like if you drink it like right out of the brewing machine or whatever process you use, it's too hot, and they're like that temperature, there are flavors that like aren't there, that only get there when you hit about like 140, 145 degrees. That's like the real sweet spot for drinking a cup of coffee.
So this is a new one. I didn't know you had done this. I know you were doing a bunch of measuring around food. So this might be an extension of that. So tell me more about how you went about. First of all, how did you decide to do this? How did you decide, I'm going to start measuring coffee related?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, man. That might have just come from within. I think it's because I bought a good coffee machine, and then sometimes like a more professional device will have features you didn't know you needed, but those features you didn't know you needed like cause you to make decisions you didn't have to make before. So like a Mr. Coffee, you just plug it in and it makes coffee. But like this highly reviewed coffee maker from wherever it was, I found, I was reading reviews, lets you like set the temperature. So I was like, oh crap, now I gotta like make a decision.
I'm like, and then I might as well collect some data and figure out what the best decision is.
Right. Yeah. So like if you just make somebody choose something like that, then if that person's me, they're going to go through a whole exercise of trying to like figure out the relationship.
And is this so how are you recording these things? And are you doing this systematically? And
with coffee?
Yeah, with the coffee. Let's use the coffee as an example. So like do you have a notebook next to the coffie maker? Or are you pulling out your computer and putting this in Excel?
Yeah, just putting it in a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. So the date?
No, I didn't think that was relevant to record the date.
Like Fridays are
but I'd take a bunch of glasses down, from the shelf. They've all been sitting there on the shelf the same amount of time, so they're all the same temperature, and pouring the coffee into the cups and timing how long it is, and taking the temperature inside the cups, mm-hmm. and drinking them at different, taking notes and so on. So yeah, just going about it like a scientist would.
And does your wife find this endearing or strange or infuriating?
She just kind of ignores it. She goes along with it. My sister, I like did a blog post on the results of the coffee thing, and she like reposted it and said, "This is basically who my brother is."
Yeah, I see.
If you want to understand Dan, like that's him.
Okay, so all right, so let's do this. So that obviously this is a very personal bit of data collection and analysis. Mm-hmm. What are some other like projects like that you've had? I don't know if you still are measuring food, but you were doing a lot of measuring food in terms of portion size and so on. If I remember correctly, this is a few years back. You have like a professional scale.
Yeah, I've got scales like at home and at work. I'm not so into the food anymore. Like I go through phases like that, but I think I was listening to an interview with this guy, David Blaine, the
magic guy.
Yeah. And
the magic guy, the magician. Sure. Right. The magic guy.
Also kind of like a human stunt, guy.
He is. Yes.
And I don't know if it was this video on breath holding where he was talking about learning to hold his breath or some other video, but basically he, shows these before and after pictures of him like quite heavy and then like totally like, ripped. And he said, I got from here to here by just like eating like incredibly precisely measured amounts of food, like over a period of time. Like your results might vary. Mm-hmm. And this kind of like, triggered something in my head because if you read the news about, consumption of food, and probably people listening to this are going to like have opinions and get in the fight. You just keep reading over and over again. It's like, it's not the number of calories that you eat, it's the quality of the calories.
It's a type of, not all calories are created equal.
Reduce calories and gain weight at the same time. And there's all this stuff, right? And a lot of it. But then, if you like take a big step back and you like, pull it to the extremes, like, yes, there are experiments where people haven't eaten anything for literally a year or more. Like people who weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds have like just gone on total starvation, and lo and behold, their weight does drop because they start burning that fat to live on, right? And of course, there have been situations in which people were put into work camps, and we've seen pictures of them come out rail thin. So you're like, there does have to be some relationship between the amount of food you're consuming and your weight. And so I wanted to see, is this true for me? And so I started just carefully measuring the number of calories that I was eating and like kind of clocking it down and so on. And, really just letting what I was eating be random, but I was just measuring it and weighing myself on a Wi-Fi enabled scale that would send my weight to the scale every single day, and eating nothing beyond that. And, lo and behold, it did hold for me too. I mean, maybe I'm an outlier, but I think there's a really strong relationship between the number of calories you put into yourself and your weight if you're recording everything very exactly.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. It reminds me of a story of one of my quant psych professors in graduate school who switched from Coke to Diet Coke, and then basically mathematically figured out how long it would take before he loses the 9 pounds that he wanted to lose. And he hit that number pretty, everything else was held pretty constant. And, he pretty much hit that number, in the time period that he estimated.
Right.
But yeah, because I think there is that. Clearly, it's a more complex relationship than that if you're trying to optimize other things.
Yes.
But it seems to make.
Yeah. And I've read credible articles that say when you give laboratory animals Diet Coke, they actually gain weight because they, somehow the system compensates for the lack of calories in the Coke and puts it on in other places. So I think when you do something like that, you have to be extremely careful that you're holding everything else constant. I think that's why, there's that basically non-effect between exercise and weight loss, because it's very hard to keep the number of calories that you're eating constant as you start exercising more. It's just, your body is giving you cravings to eat more. But if you do, then yeah, I think it's also clear that, you exercise, you're going to lose weight. Another thing I started,
or if you're going to exercise, your body's going to change.
You're going to burn fat.
That's right.
I don't mean, yeah, of course. Another thing I was interested in was like how your waist size changes when you lose weight. And so I was able to find like something on Reddit where all these people were like, there's like a forum for like weight loss, and a lot of people are posting like their before and after pictures and their before and after stats. So I just kind of like scraped that and got like, I don't know, maybe 100 examples of like men and women like before and after weight loss and what what happened to their waistline. And then I found some study on this by this professor who did this with several hundred people, and I was able to get the data from him and analyze it as well. So like now I have a pretty good feeling for like what that function looks like.
And is it nonlinear?
It might be, but I kind of just, I came up with like a linear estimate, right?
Okay.
Like how many inches, how many pounds do you need to lose to take off an inch? I think it's about 7 or something like that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you were going with there's this sort of belief that, and I may be misstating it, that like that stomach fat is the last fat to go. You can, as you lose weight, you lose it at all these other places, but the last place seems to be the stomach. I thought that's where you were headed with that idea. Oh no,
that's interesting, and maybe there is something there. I mean, at first blush, it doesn't sound like plausible, but I did hear some study that said, yes, exercise doesn't get you to lose weight, but it does seem to reduce your waist diameter.
Oh.
Right. So it's like your pants will fit better. You won't weigh less, but your pants will fit better.
Okay.
If you exercise.
Yeah. To me, my belief, I'm pretty lucky in life because that weight isn't a particularly problem for me. If I want to, I can change my body pretty, I wouldn't say easily, but directly. It's not that struggle. It's just put in the time and the focus. But I've always sort of come to the realization is if you want to lose weight, if you want to become less fat, it's the eating stuff matters. But if you want to feel good, the benefits are on that's not exactly, if you're putting junk in your body, you're going to feel pretty terrible. But the benefits of exercise are beyond just weight. It's about energy, and it's about ideas, and it's about feeling like pleasure, like having a body that's fit feels better than having a body that's unfit.
Have you told your listeners about the tripod before?
I haven't. No, the tripod has never come up.
The tripod, like that changed my life. That is a sticky idea.
We should put that behind the paywall. Then.
I don't live it. I don't live it like I should. But
tell the listeners the tripod.
It's your thing. I'll just screw it up. What is the tripod?
To me, so I have a lot of opinions about health and well-being that have been evolving a lot a lot over the years, especially having studied well-being a lot and thought about it a lot. But I've always sort of believed that the base, the foundation for living a good life, just almost no matter what path you pursue, whether it's an artistic path or an achievement path or a meaning path, is to have a strong, sort of healthy body. And to me, there's the three ways to do that. And that is sleep, exercise, and eating. And so if I'm sleeping well, if I'm exercising often, and I'm eating well, I can handle tremendous amounts of stress. I can push myself very, very hard if I need to. I can sort of accomplish most things that I need to accomplish. But if you remove, so it's called the tripod, because if you think about it like a stool, if you remove one of those things, the other two really can't make up for it. You can try, but it's not going. Like, people who are sleep deprived will often up their calories to be able to try to compensate for it, and you can only compensate for it imperfectly in that way. And so whenever I'm struggling, whenever I'm having a hard time, I just go back to that. Double down on sleep, exercise, and eating right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that rubbed off on me. Like, yes, I saw somebody, who was tracking her activity through an activity tracker, and say what you want about those, but one thing she figured out was that when she went to conferences, like, she was sleeping a lot less. And then that just made me aware of this problem. And so now, like, when I go to a conference, like, I learn from you, like, take a nap.
Yeah.
Or I, like, intentionally sleep in and stuff like that. I do whatever I can to sleep a little more. I do whatever I can to eat a little bit less, just because I'm at a conference and I know that at a conference there are all these things that make it very easy to forget that you're sleeping less and eating more.
And then you come back from a conference wiped.
Yeah.
Right. You're just worn out.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to, just for the listeners, I had to apologize to Dan, because today is, this will be posted a long time from now, but today is World Burpee Day. And so I recruited some people to do 100 burpees this morning. So that's kind of a very tripod-y exercise that I may not have done at some other point in my life, but
totally.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact you had that idea and that you carried it out, it means that your statement that you're lucky is kind of BS, right? You're not lucky that you've been able to, like, maintain your weight. You're just an incredibly disciplined person who actively tries to manage, like, the amount of sleep he gets, the amount of exercise he gets, and the amount and the quality of what he's eating.
Yeah, that's
most people most of the time, like, are not thinking about that stuff. Well, probably.
Yeah, to me, it's a priority. Actually, right now, I've doubled down on my health the second half of this year. I have kind of a sort of intermediate to-do list. Like, these are sort of things that I should be doing day to day. So it's not like a specific today to-do list, and the first thing on the list right now is health. And I actually wrote out, I stole this, I think, from Tim Ferriss or someone. It's like, is health really number one? Like, is it really number one? And if it is, then your decisions and behaviors should reflect that. And I don't feel bad about that, because I know that, as I said earlier, is I can do lots of other stuff better, more efficiently otherwise. And here's the other one, is like, I want to enjoy my life. Like, I just want to enjoy my day to day. Like, I like being energized, and I'm funnier. Like, I'm more fun. I'm a better friend. I'm a better everything if I've taken care of my health. So,
is there a flip side to that? Like, is there something to be said for not taking care of your health? Like, are there? Yeah,
that's the Nassim Taleb kind of argument, I think, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of what you think when you think about, Olympic athletes and the people that, you put on a pedestal and you watch their, like, stories on TV. You think, well, did they miss something, very important about being a human being by spending all that time training and not doing things that other people are doing? So if you're constantly, like, thinking health, I'm maximizing health, like, what are you
giving up?
Yeah,
no doubt. So See, this is one thing I like about you, Dan, because you're very good. You're very good at thinking in opposites.
Skeptical. Well,
no, it's actually I think it's a comedian.
skepticism.
It's actually a comedy trait. It's thinking the reversal, right? So you always sort of, if someone's saying, well, X is good, you kind of go, well, how might it not be good? You did this to me last night. And so now you're doing it again, which I appreciate. So the answer is yes, you can miss out. You can miss out on fun, excitement. But the issue is, for me, I regularly push it the other way. Like part of the reason I doubled down on health right now is because I spent the first half of the year traveling all over the world and being jet lagged and, carousing and doing, you know what I mean? And being on adventure and having fun and not eating as many salads as I would like and eating more burgers and things like that. But the issue is, and again, you're right. I don't want my life to always be is health number one, because I loved being in Dubai, and it's really hard to make health number one when you're in Dubai, I would say. But I also wouldn't want that always on the other side, right? So if I spent my whole life doing that, I wouldn't be as good a person as I am now, I think.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be as happy for living the life I want to be living. Happy is not exactly the right word.
Yeah. But there's also just a few seconds of bliss that you feel like when you're eating like chicken wings and drinking beer, and it's just like so good. It's like an amazing drug. I know it only lasts like less than 20 minutes, but
yeah,
man,
I get it.
Buzz.
And that's why I think like even among like the really hardcore healthy people have built cheat days in as a result of that. And one is because it allows them to kind of feel rewarded. It's not the constant have to have self-control. You're not denying yourself all the time. I think there's some benefits to that. I have to tell you, I've never been a food is pleasure kind of guy. I've always viewed food as fuel. And the worst I have it when it comes to chicken wings and beer and all that stuff is when I'm really stressed out, end of the day, I may lay into some comfort food. Yeah. I may make some nachos. And I think that's fine. But the problem, of course, is when you do it on Monday night and then you do something similar on Tuesday night and you do something similar on Wednesday night. Now it's a little bit like you're using food to cope and deal with stress. And I can think of better ways to do that. Yeah.
But right. I don't know, like the whole cheat day thing, it's funny, it's sometimes I think it's harder to, have these intermittent cheats as opposed to like think categorically about something. Like it's like, what if you said like, I'm going to smoke one cigarette a week? Like, wouldn't that be like just a worse state than like either smoking or just never touching a cigarette again? I mean, not obviously worse for your health would be smoking, but there's something about this categorically saying no to things that makes it easier to maintain.
I think that's right.
I heard this rabbi said like, the surest way to like get me to stop eating chocolate would be to like start manufacturing it with pork in it. Because like I'm fully used to the idea of not eating pork. I categorically reject it. So there wouldn't be any cheat at all, and it would be much easier for me to deal with chocolate. Yeah. But the fact that it doesn't makes it something that it's like very hard, because sometimes I'm telling myself it's okay, sometimes I'm not.
Yeah, I guess if you have to make decisions about it. I think the way these guys do I don't do cheat days, so I couldn't tell you personally about it. I think the thing about cheat days is that it's like within these parameters. And so it doesn't risk spilling over in a way that's a problem for them. All right, enough about me. So so I'm glad. Thank you for the tripod thing. It's a good reminder, especially right now when I've been really using that approach in life, needing to kind of like build a better foundation for myself.
Well, there's this idea that like about you, about me, but the relationship is a third thing. that's like between us. And that triangle, that idea, it's in our relationship.
The tripod,
sorry.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I got it from you, but it's now part of my life. Something I think about, and it's in this third creature, which is our relationship.
I see this thing we share.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just telling you last night, it's like, I like to. So normally we don't do a podcast we're at a conference right now for the listener. So normally Dan and I usually do a walk at a conference.
Yep.
That fits the tripod thing very nicely, because usually at conferences you just sit and talk to people.
Yeah.
And so instead we walk. So last thing about data, you measure steps, because I remember you talking about how many fewer steps you walk when you're at a conference.
Yep.
Right.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And so, okay. So now you collect a lot of data, and you're like a Brookstone, company's dream, because you're always buying gadgets and stuff to measure and so on. But you also then take your insights and you write about them.
Yeah.
So you have a blog, Decision Science News.
Yep. That
you've been doing for how long? You were blogging before people knew what blogging was.
Yeah. In 2003, when I was a postdoc at Columbia University, I said, I'm going to write a blog post every week until I get tenure. That was the idea.
And that's why you're still.
And I left academia. I would have gotten tenure, and I guess I could go and get it somewhere right now. But I never actually did it.
Why do you want tenure, Dan? I need to stop blogging.
So I don't know when I'm going to stop this blog. Yeah, but it became. So that's one question in behavioral economics: is if you like have a habit for so long, does it just become part of you? Does it stop being work? Is it like avoiding pork?
I believe I 100% believe that.
So now I've been doing it so long. Yeah, even if I had tenure, maybe I'd still be doing it. And I feel very guilty if like.
Do you miss a week? Do you ever miss a week?
Sometimes won't be able to do it in that week, but the next week I will go and backfill it.
Okay.
Like do the.
So you may miss a deadline, but you never miss a blog.
Force measure, like if you have pneumonia or something like that. Yeah. I might miss a deadline, but I've never missed a blog. There is a post there every week, going back to 2003.
Yeah. And do you have a practice around this? Like, do you have a particular day of the week? Do you have a process to that you've got, when do you launch these? When are they usually posted?
There isn't a process. Like there isn't a time when like I say this is blog time. I just at some point during the week, like it happens. It's just in my head, and I don't know what I'm going to write about, and I don't know, when I'm going to do it. But it just happens.
It has to get done.
It just has to get done. Yeah.
And so you don't have. So you sit and write a blog post. Yep. You don't have like 20 partial blog posts in a folder somewhere that you're kind of fussing with, and you're like, oh, I think I'm going to work on the conference steps one this week.
I have a lot of ones that are just ideas that I'm going to go back and like eventually finish off, but usually I'd never go back to them. Like usually something more pressing comes along and I just post the more pressing thing. Yeah, I do have a lot of half-started ones. There's one that I want to finish up called Weigh Your Fish with a Ruler.
Okay. I like this idea.
Yeah. I got a fishing license and for my daughter who likes fishing, and it came with this magazine, and it had this article called Weigh Your Fish with a Ruler. And it lets you know like for different species of fish at different lengths, like how much they'd weigh. And so I like scraped the data out of that and like plotted the function out of it. And it's kind of similar to like this stuff with like waist size and pounds lost and other research I've done on like how bodies change when you change their weight and things like that. Like it's interesting to know that like this is just for fish.
Yeah.
But they're like, I don't know. I'm always looking for like shortcuts and heuristics and like little regularities that are out there in the world that if you know them, like you can make educated guesses about things, and you can know when someone's lying to you or when like there's a mistake if somebody like says they caught such and such a fish and it was this heavy. And, you look at it and you're like, no, that's
impossible.
That's impossible. Yeah.
That's fun.
So that'll be coming to Decision Science News sometime. It's probably been in the unfinished section for about 2 years.
Well, this is not going to come out till January. So if you want to if you want to make this, you want to launch them simultaneously. Now you know when to do it. So you write. I mean, and you do a lot of writing because you're writing your blog every week, and then you write academic papers, conference proceedings, and so on.
Yep.
And you used to write comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things what I like about you is your writing practice. I'm envious of it. Like, you're a good writer and you do volumes of writing, and it's usually pretty interesting stuff because it connects your skills with data. Like, you're like a dual threat, right? You have this very strong data focus, and then you're good at communicating it. And one of the things I noticed that you do a lot is you communicate a lot with figures. Right? So you're good about visually communicating work, as you alluded to earlier, in terms of programming. So you write a program to draw a graph for you, which I think is neat, which I can't do. So on Decision Science News, or on your blog,
it's on my website.
On your website, you did a post that was, the first version was 1996, and then the last is 2009, about how to be a better improviser.
Yep.
So these are, 8 pages or so of thoughts about how to be a better improviser. So I printed this out. I've looked at it a long time ago, but I revisited it because I have a lot of improvisers on the show.
Yeah.
I've now started doing improv.
Yep.
Reading about it.
Yep.
And so I looked at it in terms of,
that gets more traffic than like anything, I think, on my website. Like, so many people find that article and like read it and write me thank you letters and things like that.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's popular.
It certainly has a big footprint. If it's been there for so long, that helps, right? So if people are Googling how to be a better improviser,
how to improvise, improv tips, whatever, they find it. It's been translated into other languages,
into German and French. Yes.
Just by volunteer. I mean, it started. So like I was saying about the, what's the relationship between, a fish's length and its weight? Like, I'm always trying to ask, like, what are the regularities? Like, what are the simple relationships, and to make something that's very complicated, very simple. I think my phone's ringing.
Okay. We're going to turn that off. We might edit this out. We might not. I try to keep these things pretty fluid.
Okay. So I was taking, I took a lot of, I have a lot of experience doing improv. I learned improv at the University of Chicago, which is one of the birthplaces of American improv, if not the birthplace.
Which is so ironic given the saying about the University of Chicago.
Where fun goes to die.
Yeah. Yep. The irony of that is, it's great.
But all these amazing Mike Nichols and Ed Ashner and Elaine May and like writers for SNL and improvisers, they all came out of the University of Chicago. So I was totally into it. And I took a lot of classes. And, in grad school, I did this project called Sitcom, which was kind of like, if you had to teach a computer how to write a sitcom, like, what rules would you give it? Like, what are the regularities that explain like how a sitcom works under the hood? And so I had a show at the University of Chicago called Sitcom, where I taught these regularities to improvisers, and we used them to just improvise sitcoms on the fly. It was great. And it's been produced over and over again around the world. And so when I was taking all these improv classes, I'm listening to these teachers, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, sometimes hearing the same thing from multiple sources, and then I started asking myself, like, well, if you were to like boil this down to like a set of like rules or principles that almost a computer could follow and like be an okay improviser, like what would those rules be? And so that's how I came up with this list of things and how to be a better improviser. They were just the common things that everybody was teaching and that I noticed seemed to work when people applied them. Like, it's kind of like you don't have to really think, you just apply these things, you just internalize these rules and apply them, and things suddenly get better.
Yeah. And especially if everybody's doing them. Right?
Yeah.
That's the key. That's the thing about improv. Like if you're the only person in your improv group using the rules,
yeah,
yes, the group's better off, but the group's not doing that well.
Right.
But if everybody's doing them, now you're making scenes. Now you're yeah,
so it's a good example of that would be this rule, go line for line, which is one person says something, stops. The other person listens to that and builds their line off the last thing the other person said, not like what they've just been storing up to say next. And, it is in this principle of yes and, which you hear over and over and over
that's
again.
a common.
But the way to like get yes and to happen for you and your team is like literally stop talking after each sentence. Sentence person one, sentence person two, sentence person one, sentence person two, sentence person one. And if only one person's doing that, it's going to not work because the other person's going to go off into some huge monologue and bore the audience. But once you just replace yes and with like just say one line each and build off the other person's line, they achieve the spirit of what the yes and rule is trying to get at. And then, once you get good at that, you can relax it, forget about it.
Yeah. Well, what's the saying is learn the rules like a professional so you can break them like an artist.
Exactly.
That's Picasso, I think, is given credit for that, although I'm sure someone else came up with it. Yeah. Looking through this list of how to be a better improviser, I'll put it in the exhibits. These things ring true for me as a novice, as someone who has just enough improv skill to be dangerous. And what I like about some of this too is, so you have one that says questions should give more than they take. And that's really a nice way to say, don't ask questions, which is like make statements in a sense. And what's really cool is what good improvisers do is they can even overcome those kinds of mistakes. Like I actually am working on a talk and I'm using an improv scene to demonstrate like different roles that you might have in an organization in the same way there are different roles that you might have in an improv scene. And like one of the founding members of UCB asks a guy a question. Mm-hmm. He's like, would you like to go first? Which is a question that gives, but it's still a question. And I was amazed. The guy says, yes, I would. He just immediately was pleased to go first, even though that was him taking the harder path, in that scene, and so it's like, you have a situation that could have gone very bad, right? Which is, would you like to go first? No, I don't want to go first. You should go first. No, I should go first. That's a terrible scene.
Right. Or would you like to go first and the other person's just on the spot, which is where the don't ask question rule comes from. Right. But
you're kicking I feel like when you ask a question in improv, you're kicking the can.
Exactly. You're looking for the other person to come up with something. But I think what I don't like about the phrasing don't ask questions is because there are questions that give a lot of information.
Yes.
Like, do you say, so are we going to have shark again for dinner? Like, I just introduced the idea that we had shark yesterday for dinner. So that's something you can work with. And that's not a bad question because it's obviously got some very specific information that tells us that we did that we know each other, that we were in the same place yesterday, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's fun. I do enjoy improv. It's my favorite form of comedy at present. And it's one that I feel like I can actually do. It's decently.
Yeah. It's interesting the yes thing that probably gave you delight and gave the audience delight. And it is a big rule in improv, not to say no, but to say yes. I don't really understand that's atomic for me, but I know that it makes people happy. I know that it works. I know that it causes things to like go somewhere in scenes, but I don't really understand like why just, every time you go, yes, I would, people love it. I guess maybe they see, maybe it's because like they see that you're willing to like take a chance.
Yeah. Well, it's positive, right? So it's affirming. It's adventurous. I think it's leaning in, I have a buddy, we've been talking about this idea of living at your edge in life. And so this notion of, if you're too far over your edge, you're really stressed. And if you're not close enough, you're bored, like trying to live at your edge. And to me, saying yes in that moment is at your edge. you know? So I can't help but think this is that your former semi-secret life as a comedy performer, writer, producer, and so on, that you've internalized some of this kind of these improvisational rules and that you use them more broadly in your life. So let me make a case for this, and then you could tell me I'm either brilliant or I've never thought of this and maybe, or no way. So you were saying, oh, I could have tenure if I wanted it, you know, kind of thing, which I completely agree. Any university would be lucky to have you, but you don't. Like you're a little bit of a strange case in academia, because you could be at an elite school, and yet you've been like a little bit nomadic. So, you know, had a professor job, then you did this whole thing at Max Planck Institute. Then you moved into industry, working for these big tech companies. Is some of that from your kind of improvisational background, where you're willing to kind of strike out in a different, less scripted kind of way?
I haven't thought of that. I mean,
I predicted one of these answers.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that. What do you think? Am I just overly applying this?
I mean, I do like that quote, like, be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid, which I think is attributed to Goethe. And I felt that it is important to, like, you know, if there's something that like scares you the most, like, you can address that fear by just like taking it head on. So like if you're just terrified of like what would happen to you if you didn't get tenure, or, you know, one way to like deal with that is like just double down and say, okay, I'm going to leave academia, maybe come back, maybe not. And that just being, it's kind of like you were talking about this edge, putting yourself to the edge, right? If you're putting yourself in a situation where you think like you can't really coast, you're kind of like pre-committing yourself to striving more and to trying harder. There's like a nice quote from Herbert Simon, who was a psychologist and economist and a Nobel laureate in economics. And he was at Carnegie Mellon University, which didn't have a great reputation at the time. And of course, you know, as being this genius he could have gone anywhere. He was constantly getting offers from, you know, Harvard and Caltech and all these places.
Nobel Prizes in economics will do that for you.
Yeah, they're pretty good for your job mobility within academia. But he has a phrase in his biography where he says, you know, I always stayed at, you know, what was considered like a second tier school, because I thought, you know, I won't coast here. I won't rest here. I'll always be trying to prove myself and always be like working a little bit harder. So it was a kind of commitment device, if you will, to like make himself try a bit harder. And I noticed that in my own self too, like coming out of college and applying to grad school and stuff like that. I was always working harder when I thought, you know, the future is not assured for me, and enjoying life more too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I mean, I've known you for a long time, so it's been fun seeing you. I mean, I knew of you before I knew you, kind of thing. I feel like we got to know each other in a hot tub at a conference.
BDRM?
Yeah, a long time ago in Los Angeles.
It's funny. I don't remember where we met, but
I forced my friendship on you. I don't know if you know that. You didn't know it at the time, but I was like, that guy's going to be my friend. And here we are. So you just sort of talked about, like, you know, this kind of, I don't know, you're a hacker, you know, you're very much a hacker. And so what an interesting hack for success, which is to take a non-obvious path, right? To break the rules, you know, because the thing about academia is I think of it as like train travel. You know, you're on a train and then here's the next stop, and then here's the next stop, and here's the next stop. And if you're mix hard work, talent, and luck together, they don't kick you off the train before you get to the stops that you want to be be at. But you just get off the train. You just gotten off the train
a couple times.
And it's worked out very nicely. There's other ways to travel, and live a good life. Do you think there are so like mixing things up is good for your success? Clearly,
put yourself at a disadvantage. Works for me. I don't know if that's generalizable advice for everyone. But if you notice that works for you, then it's worth trying. Yeah,
I guess you're like Larry Bird, who just decides like, I'm bored, I'm just going to play with my left hand in the next game.
Does Larry Bird do that?
He did that once. He did it in part because I think he did it. This is a story, if I remember correctly, is he did it to trash talk, or trash behave. I don't know if there's a word for this, but he basically said, I'm going to play left-handed in the next game and beat this team.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went out and played left-handed.
Okay. Yeah.
And then hit the game winner in the game. It was like,
yeah,
it's like one of those, they call him Larry Legend for a reason. Like that's legendary.
Let's talk for a second about academia. I don't know how many of your listeners are in academia, but
I don't know if I have listeners.
I was on
so I don't know.
I was on a panel yesterday with, people who got PhDs but weren't in academia. And, one thing that came up is like academia really, when people who are in it and who've always been in it, like they really can't see anything outside of it. And when I was, deep in it, because I had left once and gone to a startup and then gotten back in, I do realize that there are all kinds of people doing all kinds of things like all over the place. But once you're in there, like from the moment you start working with a advisor in graduate school, everything is just like, you will become a professor, you will get tenure, or, you will be a total failure.
Yeah, that's why I think of it. That's why I use the train track analogy.
Yeah, it is like that.
Rather than you're in a plane, And
every person, that I talked to or, about leaving academia the first time, like they all said, you'll never get back in. I've seen people leave, you'll never get back in. But it's not, they don't have a lot of data, right? And they don't know why these people left. I mean, there are people, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
it's not a valid conclusion. Just because you see people leave and not come back, it doesn't mean that they tried to come back, or it doesn't mean that like they left because they wanted to leave. A lot of people leave for other reasons, and the fact they don't come back doesn't really tell you anything about your chances of coming back.
Yeah, these are the same people who would critique your correlational design and should be critiquing this correlational design.
Right.
Right. So most people who leave academia don't leave because they really want to leave. Either someone says you got to get out, or they just don't like the work. They don't like being an academic, so they leave to do something else that's going to be more prosperous for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they never want to go back,
Yeah.
Or then you leave and you start doing something that puts you at a disadvantage for coming back.
Yeah.
And so in your case, none of those apply.
Yeah.
And also you happen to study stuff that's like super valuable both in the academy and outside. And so, yeah, look,
they see people.
I'm going to hire you at Colorado if you would ever be willing to leave New York City.
They see people leave and not come back, and so they think like everyone
can't come back. That's right.
In industry research labs where I've been for the past like decade, I see people around me in my sample get hired by academia from industry research labs. I can name like 5 people who I've seen get professorships with tenure out of Yahoo and Microsoft and IBM and places like that.
Yeah.
So it's just overfitting to the sample that and not realizing like it goes both ways.
Yeah. Now, okay. So I think there's some caveats, of course. Like, first of all, the world that we live in is a world that is rich with positions. So going to business schools and engineering programs, the jobs generally are better and less competitive there than other places in academia. And so there's less friction, I think, that allows that movement to happen. But I think you are right. Like if you took the most talented people in the business and you say, you're not allowed to work in academia for 5 years, go make your way. those people would make their way. They would, first of all, they'd be able to make their way.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them.
Sure.
And then they'd also be able to transition back.
Yeah.
Like that's because there's this, call it talent, call it interest, third variable that's causing the existing correlation.
Yeah.
Or lack of in the existing one, but we're working in the opposite way currently.
Yeah. As long as they're publishing while they're out, they're going to get back in. Now, would I give that as advice? Like, just leave academia, you'll get back in? I mean, no, I wouldn't, because I don't think it's not
live boldly. What is it? Live boldly and
be bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid. I mean, if that's your personality, then maybe you should. But I think for most people, if you're really trying to be safe, then I would say don't leave,
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, this came up today. When I was in maybe my fourth year in graduate school, I explored leaving academia. I thought it was first of all, I just thought it was a useful exercise.
Mm-hmm.
It's just important. When you study judgment and decision making like we do, it seems kind of crazy that you wouldn't think about your alternatives. So I just was walking the talk, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was a different era, I would say, but I looked at decision analysis. I was in this mathematical psych program,
mm-hmm.
and I looked at decision analytic jobs,
mm-hmm.
and realized I wasn't probably as good a fit as I would like for those kinds of jobs. I wasn't. Mm-hmm. They were hiring a lot of heavy math people
mm-hmm.
for that kind of work, which I don't have those skills. But it was a useful endeavor, I think, in terms of just knowing that I wanted to continue on the train that I was on. And then now I'm in this weird place because I've achieved enough success that I have the kind of comforts of academia, while also able to really enjoy I would say how I really enjoy the challenge of it. I'm in that sweet spot. It's not, I'm at the edge still, but I think about would I leave? How would I leave? Might I leave early? I mean, I definitely think of those kinds of things. What would I do? What would it be like? Why would I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And in part because my train is now at the last stop that has any real meaning, at mm-hmm. least in terms of checking boxes.
Right.
And so I don't know, I have some secret ideas that I can't publicly say. So maybe after I turn this off, I'll tell you.
Okay.
And then if you're a good friend of mine and you listen to this, you can email me and I may tell you also.
Or we'll just tape that part and we'll send it out.
We'll put it behind a paywall. Let me ask you a few things. Let's do these a little bit more rapid fire, just in the interest of time.
Yep.
So I was leading to this question earlier. Are there important people you need for success? So you have good skills, you have an orientation, things that lead you to be more successful, but are there certain people in the past and the present that you feel like are real necessary aspects of that?
I really benefit from people who are optimistic and believe that we can do something together, like as a group. Like I know I'm not, when I'm left to my own devices, like I'm like the biggest unit of production that you're going to have. Like I can do a blog post, I can like write a book, I can give a talk, I can write a paper, but I can't see myself like starting a company or, doing something like that's much bigger than me alone. So I've always benefited from people like I have a friend, John Bordeaux, that I produced all these comedy shows with. And he was always there saying like, this idea that you're talking about over beer, like that could be a show, like we could do this. And it's the same thing in my research collaborations. Like I have tons of ideas, but the only ones that turn into papers are usually because of some co-author who's just wants to move the ball forward, just says, okay, let's take the next step. Let's take the next step. Let's take the next step. So I'm really somebody to achieve bigger things. I really need partners. Okay. I really need drivers. I'm not like somebody who just thinks like can do it. Like I'm not like Elon Musk.
I've been kicking around this idea. I call it group genius, right? Everybody wants to talk about the lone genius, but I think so first of all, in comedy, you'll be so proud of me, Dan. because so I've been working on this thing about group genius, and like even people who seem like comedic geniuses, really there are those other people like you're describing. Like people think about Jerry Seinfeld, but why do people think about Jerry Seinfeld? Well, because they think about Seinfeld, but that's really Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David together, locked in a room, kind of thing. Chappelle Show. It's called Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show doesn't happen without Neil Brennan, without an amazing cast of actors, and so on in this sense. And I think so. What I did was you probably would have entered the data yourself. I had a RA do it for me, but look up the number of writers for comedy movie in the top 100 comedy movies on IMDb. So what percentage of those do you think had one writer?
25?
Yep. 25% had one writer.
Whoa.
Well done. But like 40% had two writers. And then the remaining were three or more.
Yep.
With as many as six.
Yep.
Kind of writers. So, right. I think that's nice evidence for group genius.
I love this idea. It's a great idea. And it's like workout buddies or something like that. An improv troupe is like that in the sense that, yes, I could go and rent a rehearsal space and improvise by myself, once a week at 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, but I'm not going to do it, even though there is such a thing as solo improvisation.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
But just having the group be like that thing that says, we're going to do this, we're going to lead to a show and so on. I'm always been fascinated with stand-ups. I see them as people who can, get themselves to just sit down and work on something and say, like, this can become a show, like this can become a special and so on, because like they're alone. There's not, I don't think usually, I guess there's some exceptions, maybe Lily Tomlin, but they're not, they don't have that cheerleader there saying like, okay, let's work on this. Let's work on this.
I agree. And maybe I'm pushing this group genius idea too far, but I actually think that even stand-up comics benefit from these group effects. And I think they're twofold. One is the time they spent with other comics, just chit-chatting about what just happened on stage, people saying, oh, have you thought about doing this? Right. There's like that informal help that comes along the way.
Yep.
But, stand-ups also benefit from the audience because stand-ups are constantly testing and revising. So to call even stand-up a lone process is, I think, a misnomer, because they couldn't do it without the audience. They actually have the most help in some ways, because in a year that you spend as a comic prepping a special, you might have 10,000 data points, 10,000 people helping you hone that work.
Would we be doing this podcast if there weren't listeners? Right? We could just record our conversations so that we could listen to them 10 years from now. But yeah, it makes me think that all these people in their bedrooms, on YouTube, making videos, talking to the camera, like they're really depending on the idea of viewers to do it, unless I'm seriously mistaken. And there's a lot of people just recording stuff for their own selves, kind of like a diary. But I imagine that the audience is a motivating force. It is for me.
I joke that I have one listener for this podcast, and that's me. I do it for me. But that's an exaggeration, because I try to do it well, because I know I have listeners. I just bought hundreds of dollars of podcast gear because I wanted a better experience for the listeners and so on. So yeah, even the fact that they're imaginary and I get very little feedback from them still spurs, I think, a potentially more successful experience. So you did something today that only a very few of my guests do, which is ask me questions and get me talking about stuff. Usually, I usually talk, but I don't. Usually, it's unprompted by the guests. What is it you want? What is it you would want to have talked about today that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think we did hit the big points I wanted to talk about.
Okay. See, that's probably why.
No, we talked about like the academia versus comedy, deciding your career paths. yeah, we talked about some stuff I didn't anticipate, like the stuff on measurement and so on. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I guess one thing that like I was kind of wondering about is why, when should you try to like realize your dream? If you think you have some dream job, like you asked me, what would you want to do?
Yes.
Like I've always felt very tempted to go into comedy, right? Like I left my first academic position to move to New York to work for the startup, but the real reason was because like I wanted to work in comedy. And a few years before that, I basically turned down a postdoc because I wanted to move back to Chicago and do comedy. And so I've always had this like nagging feeling, like should I have gone into comedy? Should I have been a writer? And I think that, and certainly among the people I used to hang out with and so on and perform with, and like a lot of them did find work in that field. Mm-hmm. But I can't say that I've fully been as bold as I could be because I never did take that chance. I never did just try my hand.
Yeah. And so you wonder what could have happened. I hate to tell you this, Dan, but you would have been great.
I try to think realistically about it, as realistically as I can. So I try to think, I try to do like matching. So I try to think like
you're like, I was about as good as that guy.
Yeah. Who did I feel like were my peers? Like who's the comparable set of people? Like, and I guess if I was in that set, I probably would have had a few TV writing jobs. But at this point, at this age, there's probably like a 1 in 3 chance I'd be between jobs. Yeah,
it's more highly
like,
variant.
I don't know if I have that kind of risk appetite.
It's a more highly variant business, right? There's fewer big winners. There's more hustling kind of thing. If you get your big break, that can change a career in a way that academically that happens too, but not. There's right. So
I mean, it's so different than academia, where you have like a guarantee. Once you get tenure, you have this guaranteed check coming in.
Yeah, it's crazy
until you retire.
It's so crazy.
It's guaranteed. In comedy, like once your show is canceled, you just don't know if you're going to work again or where you're going to work again. I guess I'm in the middle, which people in academia see as frightening, but it actually isn't that frightening. This is where like 99% of people are.
Yes.
Like I have a job that involves some skills. And like, if I get, if my company closes down, I'll probably be able to get another job with those same skills. But for professors, that's like, that is terrifying. I cannot imagine working for a company.
I know. Scientists are so risk averse. It's just crazy. Last question. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that's really, really good? It just stands out to you.
Nothing. I'll be honest.
That's right. Okay.
Yep. Right now, nothing.
Okay. That's great. That's a first.
Really?
Yeah, that's a first.
I'll tell you like one of the people I most admire right now.
Sure, that's great.
Who writes stuff that there's a guy named Hadley Wickham who is a programmer who created all of these. He's basically like taken the programming language R and made it like 10 times better through a lot of his own work. He created ggplot, like all the nice graphs that you see coming out of like on psychology blogs and psych papers are done with this programming library that he created, and he works on tirelessly and creates much more than that, like platforms for writing codes and writing books and things like that. And it's really cool to me because he was a statistician, he was a professor at Rice University, and the academic system doesn't like reward this at all.
No.
Like writing software, but at the same time, like if you step back, like few people have had as big an impact on science as he has, because like you go to any field, like you go to any journal, you look at the graphs, like they were created with his code. Like the data handling in most like experimental science, like in many fields, is like really done by this. So I do find stuff like that really inspiring, that even if you're one of these people that are like, I'm only as big as a company of one, like I'm only like one person, you can really make a massive change in the world in this day and age because of electronic dissemination of things and code like that. I mean, I'm sure now, I'll condition that by saying now there are, hundreds of contributors that work under him and with him. But as a person, like he really inspires me, and that, single-handedly changed how science appears to people.
Yeah. And so for people who aren't familiar with R, it's basically a programming language that allows you to do statistical analyses and then also presentations, so graphing and figures and so on. That is R's origins like an open source thing?
So there was a language called S, which was a commercial product, and R was like the open source version of S. And now R has just increased greatly in popularity, and because of this guy Hadley Wickham, even more so.
Yeah, all our students are learning R. You have to learn it if you're going to be a behavioral researcher.
Completely agree.
Nice, that's great. Dan, so happy we could do this.
Thanks, man.
This was fun.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guests, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr.